Now, without further delay, I'm introducing Reverend Dr. Asha Guiser. Reverend Dr. Asha George Guiser is a licensed marriage and family therapist at the Trinity Counseling Services, and she's been in practice for more than 35 years. A little background about Reverend Asha. She received her doctorate of ministry in marriage and family counseling from Eastern Baptist Seminary in 1994. She received her postgraduate training at the Council for Relationships, and she's a member of the Association of American Marriage and Family Therapy. She provides counseling and therapy for individuals, families, and couples. Her areas of expertise include intimacy and relationship building, cross-cultural relationships, and integrating Christian, spiritual, and emotional issues. Dr. George Guiser also provides spiritual direction and leadership coaching for those seeking direction, meaning, and recovery from work crisis. She's also an experienced speaker and trainer. In fact, some of us have already experienced her speeches and seminars in the past. She's presented to numerous groups on topics such as work and career concerns, anger management, separation and divorce, blended families, and conflict resolutions. She's an Episcopal priest and integrates spirituality and psychology into her practice. Actually, today, May 15th, I just learned this morning that is her ordination anniversary. And on behalf of Empatia Global, I want to wish you, Reverend Asha, a blessed anniversary and many more years to come. So with your permission, let me invite Reverend Dr. Asha George Guiser to speak to us about the different phases of Malayali culture that could lead to domestic violence. Reverend Dr. Asha Guiser.
I'm very, very grateful and humbled by your invitation. My presentation as a marriage and family therapist and as an Episcopal priest, it's going to be about the Kerala cultural factors that could lead to domestic violence. Before I begin, I want to honor really the memory of Marin Joy. Many of you know her and heard of her. And she's a Malayali woman who was murdered, yes, murdered by her Malayali husband in Tampa through domestic violence. And I want to pause and remember Marin Joy and all the Marins whose cries for help need to be heard today. I've been thinking about her as I've been preparing this presentation. So let's just put our hand on our chest for this morning and let's pause for a moment for Marin Joy. And I'd like you all to say her name, Marin Joy, in her honor. Marin Joy. I'm going to ask you today that this be a little bit more interactive. And if you know how to use the chat box, I would love to have you interact because I'm going to make this a little bit more interactive. And then if you don't know how to use the chat box, go ahead and take some notes because I'm going to have a pause after the part 1 and part 2. So let's make this interactive. I want to just check if you could put your hands up if you can hear me clearly, because sometimes the sound is not that good. If you could just put your fingers up, that would be great. Okay, thank you. So today I'm going to present the F.A.C.E.S, F.A.C.E.S first, and then I'm going to really present a case study from a Keralite marriage that rose from the ashes of domestic violence. So let's do this. In my preface, I want to acknowledge, because I am a Keralite, I want to acknowledge there are many rich and positive and delightful aspects in our culture. We should be proud of and we should rejoice in them. So what I'd like you to do is just move to your chat box and let's spend just 1 or 2 minutes, just have fun with it. Can you share with me some of the wonderful and delightful aspects of the Kerala culture? I want to put that down, so I'm watching the chat box. What are some of the wonderful parts? Because we need to rejoice in the light before we talk about the shadow. What are some of the delightful, I'm watching the chat box. What are some of the delightful? So family ties, closeness, a sense of family, of course, food, hospitality. Are there others that we need to rejoice in them? Any others? Art forms, respect for others, for elders, others. We can be very helpful, sometimes too helpful. We'll come back to that in a minute. Other things. Literacy. Yeah, we are highly one of the most literate people in all of India. Others in the chat box. Sense of belonging. Very, very important. I'll be addressing that. This is one of our very positive parts of our culture. Extended family. Others in the chat box. Taking care of elders. Most humorous people. Yes, we know we love a good laugh. Self-esteem. Okay. Any others? We need to have this aspect. We can have a sense of great simplicity. Family values. Okay, we're filling up the chat box. I want you to remember this is the rich tapestry by which we can have very, very strong moral values. Yes. Okay, hold on to that. I could spend probably this entire presentation on that. But today's presentation, in light of that light, is to look at the shadow side of our culture. When there is light, there is shadow. Without facing the shadow side, we cannot address the domestic violence that is literally killing women like Maren Joy. So F.A.C.E.S is a clinical matrix I use to assess the toxic level of domestic violence in the Kerala marriages. So when I get a referral from a family or a friend or from a priest, I use this F.A.C.E.S. You may want to write this down because I will be addressing this more clearly. First and foremost, I have never seen domestic violence without a history of trauma. Trauma in one or both of the marital partners. Untreated trauma leads to violence. I'm going to repeat that again. Untreated trauma leads to violence. Let me share with you the phases of untreated, I would call it unmetabolized trauma. So I'm going to start with F. F stands for something we cherish in our Kerala culture, family. If the family has had any repeated violence, it usually starts with a lot of spanking with a cane or a belt or a tutelar as a child, or there is trauma when a mother is being hit by the dad. Alcoholic abuse. Alcohol abuse is on the tremendous rise in the Kerala culture. One of the hidden abuses is sexual abuse within the home. All of this contribute to trauma. And I do a lot of work with body. Body holds the memory of the trauma way past the event of the trauma. The second part of Kerala families is we tend to overparent. And overparenting comes from fear. This kind of Kerala overparenting prevents the child as they become young adults to have no personal agency on school, on career, on finding a mate, on finances. We call this internal authority. And this is a complicated part. Kerala culture generally, I know it's changing, generally overparent their sons, creating men who at times are not able to face the pressures and chores and challenges of relational life. What overparenting creates is a rage within that sort of lies dormant till marital conflict lights up the rage. Overparenting creates immature adults who do not have the internal coping skills to manage conflicts and stressors. A tremendous emotional overdependence on parents makes anxious young adults in our culture. Kerala families put tremendous pressure on three things. Now, we can disagree about that in the chat box, but this is my clinical perspective. There are three things we put a lot of pressure on. Finding the right mate. The right mate who has a light skin. We call that, my father used to say, we want people with Aryan features, not Dravidian features, and they must come from a good family. Second pressure is making lots of money, being financially very successful. And third, making babies. Mate, money, babies. When these three are held in such high value, trust me, there is rage. When the mate is not ideal, when you cannot make lots of money, and when you are faced with infertility issues preventing babies. This is the F part that we need to look at as a community. I want to go to A. A stands for anger. What I love about being a Keralite is we are a passionate people. We laugh hard, we can cry hard, we talk furiously. Malayalam is a passionate language. I want to address how unprocessed anger becomes violent in a crime of passion. I exhort all of us to raise families with tools to deal with anger in a healthy way. What I see in my clinical office is a lot of screaming, hitting, pushing, shoving, throwing things, choking, calling names, threatening, blackmailing, shaming. These are not healthy anger management tools. When we are disappointed by the lack of an ideal mate, when we are disappointed by the lack of making the money we had hoped for, and we are disappointed by the lack of babies that we desired, my question is, how do we express these feelings without rage and violence? Anger management tools are essential for every marriage, especially if we come from families with violent trauma. So that's the F and that's the A. I want to move to C. F-A-C. C stands for control. If the partner comes from a very over-parenting family with over-controlling parents, trust me, immaturity reigns. I observe a lack of tools how to bring mutuality and healthy control versus subjugation and submission, which are really part of our patriarchal culture. I spend a lot of clinical hours teaching our young men and women how to redefine control with healthy boundaries regarding money, sex, chores, social life, and making requests, not demands. F.A.C.E. Let me move to E. E stands for envy, Asuya. This E is in our blood. It's in our cells. Growing up in Kerala, I was an eyewitness to this insidious infection of envy on our daily basis in my family, in my neighborhood, and God forbid, even in my church. Envy is the green monster that eats at us when someone is doing better than us. And envy leads to gossip and character assassination. Envy is a universal sin, but it's deeply, deeply embedded in our Kerala culture. If finding a mate, making money, and making babies are the main values, what do we do if someone else in our culture has a better mate, makes more money, and has better or more babies? Envy can be deadly in domestic violence. Comparing and contrasting only lead to feeling worthless and rageful. I find treating Asuya, envy, very, very difficult because it is embedded in our culture. F.A.C.E. I'm coming to S. S stands for secrecy and shame. Remember, there is no domestic violence without trauma. Trauma, when not brought to the light, leaves shame and secrecy. As part of the treatment for domestic violence, I work on bringing the secrets of sexual abuse or alcoholism or violence or mental illness or pornography or incest to light in the safest way possible. I do this slowly and gently. Trust me, there is great resistance and invisible loyalty to families that keep things underground, secretive. Parents who have participated in the abuse and secrecy sabotage therapy and treatment and prevent from bringing shadow things to light. Chemikanam, chemikanam, sahikanam, chemikanam, sahikanam. They become the code words to keep the secrets that make domestic violence mushroom exponentially. If the trauma is not treated and transformed, I want you to listen to this carefully. If it's not treated and transformed, the trauma will be transmitted in domestic violence. Pain that is not treated will be transmitted. So that's the F.A.C.E.S. I'm going to pause here. You may have something to add or to ask me about F.A.C.E.S. It's a matrix I use for treatment for domestic violence, because I am going to present a short case study on the F.A.C.E.S. and treatment and hope. Before I do that, do you have thoughts, questions, additions, debates on F.A.C.E.S. Let's fill up the chat room. I'm going to be reading it. Do you have thoughts? And you could say, yes, I agree. No, I completely disagree. I'm all right. I'm good for a good debate. But I think it's important we understand F.A.C.E.S to face domestic violence. Thoughts or questions? I'm going to pause here before I do a case study. Okay, I'm hearing completely agreed. We have an agreeable soul here. Others, stay active. I totally agree with envies. We are an envious people. I'm doing a history on Travancore and Kerala, and this goes back for centuries. Okay, well presented. Thank you for your compliment. Others, thoughts? I would like you to participate because this is important we understand. I agree also, but the challenge with all of this is accepting that there is a problem. Well, yes, there is a problem. Others, anything about F.A.C.E.S that confused you, that helped you? I want to just get us into the, to really dealing with this. I think mental illness plays a major role. I really take, I'm very kind about a diagnosis. I don't think the diagnosis is a label. A diagnosis is a way. If I have cancer, I would like to have a diagnosis so I can have treatment. If I have diabetes, I would like to have treatment. So if I'm bipolar, I would like to have treatment. If I have a major depressive disorder, I would like to have treatment. I think as a Kerala culture, we need to look at whatever is ailing us so we treat it, manage it, and live abundant lives. I am not embarrassed by a diagnosis. I deal with it with full disclosure and great hope. Anybody else? A healthy competition among peers is helpful for productiveness. Where do you draw the line? When does it become obsessive? That's an excellent question. Competition is different than comparing and contrasting in such a way that we become very envious. You know, when I run a race, it gives me the juice to run the race to get to the finish line. But if I have to kill the opponent, that is not cool. So thanks for that question. There's a very fine line. Healthy competition comes from the healthy part of the brain. How do you help a person with envy? I personally think people who are raised in Kerala has more comparisons. We're going to talk about envy in a minute in my case study. If the guy is in denial mode and not willing to sit down for a conversation, how do we deal with that? I think this is pretty crucial. I've been very blessed that I have convinced in my clinical practice for the males to come along. But men generally are very, very much, there's a lot of shame for men to come into therapy. Denial is not a river in Egypt, it's deadly. We have to, as a group, be gentle in the invitation, inviting males and females to get help. How does alcoholism? Alcoholism is huge, huge. I'll present a little bit of about addiction in my case study. Okay, I'm going to move on to the case study. Let me just check whether you're all awake and can hear me. Can you just give me a little thumbs up if you can hear me? I want to make sure we are on board. All right, great. Okay, I'm going to present a case study. Obviously, I've changed a lot of the information for anonymity. And this is a case study. It's important you know that I worked with this case for 3 years. Not 3 days, not 3 weeks, 3 years. So, but I want to present this because this is a case study where I worked with this particular couple to transform the violence to a non-violent marriage. I'm just going to give a fictitious name. I'm going to call the wife Sheila, and I'm going to call the husband Rajan. Fictitious names just for our process. Let me talk about the F. Sheila came from a very, very overparenting family. Dad was a very respected community member in the Kerala culture here, but he was a pretty violent alcoholic at home. Mom was a very overprotective mother. And in high school and in college, Sheila had to break up with her American college sweetheart because parents wanted her to marry a good Malayali boy from a good family. One of the things that Sheila literally dealt with, she was all her life from the time of birth, she was teased for her dark skin, and her skin was as dark as mine, and she was always called Kaka, a crow. And that family would tease her that she will need to sacrifice more because she had dark skin. Colorism is a huge problem in Kerala. It damages self-worth. Sheila was a very hardworking college student. She became an engineer top of her class. One of the secrets that Sheila had to hold on to was she was sexually abused when she was a teenager by her older first cousin. And the parents just told her to forgive him and told her to keep this a secret, never to mention it to a soul. Rajan, on the other hand, was a lucky, happy-go-lucky guy, only son among 3 sisters. And he was immediately given male privilege by his parents. He had hardly any chores, any responsibilities. Till the day he married, his mommy made him chai and breakfast every day. He barely got to college, very charming, and had trouble landing a career. His mom was in many ways emotionally married to this only son. His secret was he spent hours in college addicted to pornography. And he was looking for a mate to sort of fulfill his sexual dreams influenced by the photoshopped porn images. But he also wanted a mate to be his mom, maternal, who did everything for him. Till the day I saw him in therapy, he talked to his mom twice a day. So that's the F. I'm going to go to A. I have rarely seen a couple that had so much anger. I literally had to stand up in my office to get them to calm down. Anger erupted literally on the honeymoon as Sheila and Rajan had very different sexual expectations, and there was tremendous sexual pain and conflict. Sheila would just sort of freeze and flight, and Rajan would fight, always with name calling. Let me move to C. C is control. Money became a huge control issue, especially when Rajan lost his job soon after marriage. More conflict ensued about who will do what chores. Violence increased. E was the most painful part, envy. They had 3 miscarriages. 3. Infertility became the breaking point of this couple. All their friends had better mates, better homes, and of course had more babies. Envy was a catalytic agent in domestic violence. Let me move to S. I soon discovered the porn addiction, the impact of an alcoholic dad, the trauma of sexual abuse by the cousin, and I began to work with them. I brought the parents in. I was very surprised that they all came into session. I set boundaries with both sets of parents, and I told them not to be enmeshed with their adult children. Rajan was responsive. He went to the sexual addiction recovery group, and I sent him to an anger management group in Philadelphia. I began working on trauma recovery for Sheila. Long work, lots of techniques, a lot of work. And I began to teach the couple to collaborate without escalation and to collaborate without hyperarousal. I will say 3 years of very hard work, courageous work by the couple and their families, facing the F.A.C.E.S, paid off ever so slowly, and the couple is still in recovery with not a single instance of domestic violence in the past year, especially amidst COVID. Very challenging case, but this is the work that is necessary to end domestic violence. There is no simple path because it's multi-generational. Facing the F.A.C.E.S of our Kerala culture, I believe, is very, very challenging. But by truly and I would say courageously facing them, I believe we save lives. I wish we could have saved Maren Joy's life. When we save lives, I believe we birth literally a new generation with a new face that is safe from domestic violence and from intergenerational trauma. And this is how hope abounds. For there is always light if only we are brave enough to face the shadow. If we are brave enough to be the light. This is the end of my formal presentation. I promised Sarah that I will not go on and on because I'm not an on and on person. But I presented the faces and I presented a case study. And then I'm going to pause here because I want this to be a little bit more interactive and see whether you have any questions about the case study of F.A.C.E.S. And then we'll conclude. There's one question here. To what extent do you think religion plays a role in preventing an abused from seeking help or moving on in some religious discourage anyone from getting divorced? How do you find a balance? Also, how do we prevent someone from using religion as a tool for corrective control, to have more babies when one person is not ready? That's an excellent question. I particularly work in the Christian framework, and the abuse of the biblical narrative of control and submissiveness is horrific in the Kerala culture. So part because I'm an Episcopal priest, I have to tell them that you cannot use parts of the scripture for domestic abuse. So I work very closely with true faith and using religion as a baseball bat. So I work very much into that. And also procreation is part of a biblical narrative. So if one person cannot have babies, does not want to have babies, the guilt and shame, I address that very, very clearly, clinically, and spiritually. I'm going to pause here because I'm sure you have questions or you're asleep. I don't know where you're at, but let's see whether you have any questions or thoughts or feedback or debates. What can we do as an association to help with the root causes F.A.C.E.S in our culture? How can we help our community members with marital disharmony? I think we have 66 people here today. You become ambassadors, literally, to be very fluent in, when you hear domestic violence, to be very fluent in the matrix. What's happening in your family? Where's your anger? Where are the control issues? Where's the envy at? What's the secret? And getting people to get help. We are very, very proud people as Keralites. We don't like to get help. We think we can do it within our family. We can do it within our system. And parents really believe they can give help when they sometimes are part of the problem and they don't have the tools. One of the reasons, Sarah, I did not want to go first, you invited me, is my daughter said, Mom, Keralites don't want to hear what you have to say. And I waited for a long time, Sarah, as you very well know, but I think we need to become ambassadors of this matrix and getting people to get help. What should my wife work when I have enough money? It's a statement from a social, why should my wife work when I have enough money? It's this statement from a social opinion. Very good question. I could do a whole thing on money and Keralites. We don't work just for money. We work to fulfill our mission and purpose. And so we have, when I do premarital therapy, I ask the wife and the husband, what is your purpose? And it is good if we can get paid when we work, but it's not just for money. So this whole debate, I make enough money and you insulting me by working, that is really missing the point of purpose and mission. In how receptive are the Kerala community to therapy in the US? What's your success rate? I will tell you, in the last 4 years, I have more referrals from the Kerala community. That's really good news. I used to have North Indians as primarily my client populations, but I have more Kerala people because I believe the word gets around. Let's go get help and let's work this out. Usually very resistant, but I remain hopeful. In the case study, at what point did the couple in your case study decide to come for counseling? There was a protective order issued, and the judge mandated they go for therapy. So it was adjudicated by the court, and that's how I was referred by their priest and the court, and that is how they came into therapy. And eventually the protective order was lifted when the violence ended. Mental illness is a big issue in our culture. No one wants to talk about it. This is a very touchy subject. We have great stigma about mental illness. I am not sure why. I think we're a great and proud people. So I would say it's a big issue. Great stigma. I am trying to remove the stigma. And I would like all of you to remove the stigma. I believe all of us need mental tune-up once in a while. It's like a car. It has to be maintained. I mean, I don't know why we take a car to the shop for maintenance, for alignment. I think we all need a little alignment once in a while. I have no shame, but we do as a Keralite people, and that keeps us in the shadow. In your research or case study, have you found Keralites being more? Yes, domestic abuse is highest among Keralites, and due to very many issues, it's very high. I think we are a very passionate people. It's very, very high. It is lubricated by their use of alcohol. I will say that. I mean, I can do a whole thing on alcohol. It is lubricated by the use of alcohol. In order to prevent unhealthy marriages, we may have to rewrite our cultural norms of getting married by 30 as a sign of success for the parents. This is my invitation to all of you, and you're not going to like it, but it's okay. I'm a huge believer that every couple, and because I love Keralites and I'm a Keralite, every Kerala couple that gets married, whether you are in India, Kuwait, whether you are in America, find the Cadillac premarital therapist. Go get some tools for your F.A.C.E.S. Okay? Why do we spend so much time on education when we don't spend any time on marital education? I would say whether you are 30 or 35 or 21, get some tools, become equipped for marriage. So that's, but I know I am promoting my profession. There's no self-interest here. I would say get some tools. I blame beef consumption and thus high testosterone levels on the elevated violence. You know, I've thought about that because Keralites have, among all Indians, the highest cardiovascular issues and high cholesterol. And I wondered why. My own theory is it's not beef consumption. I believe, now you're going to disagree with me. I've had a lot of time to think about this. Keralites tend to intermarry each other. But let me specifically talk about the Christian community. We intermarry each other. And I think if you intermarry for too many generations, you're not well. So it could be beef. I'm interested in that thought, but I don't know. I'd love to have your input. Many women have to cook. Oh, I missed this one. Okay, hold on. Do you feel the parents of your patients need therapy too? I never work with a couple without working with the parents. Parents are generally very, very resistant. They think I'm a crazy woman. I generally I'm patiently work with them, and I cannot change the marriage without changing the parental system. I can't. Many men think women has to cook food at home, and they do not have to do anything with kitchen. They have to come out and sit on the kitchen. Food should be ready. Addressed because I've seen at least 3/5 say that it's a woman's job. All those who are on this Zoom, teach your wonderful male children that cooking is godly. Teach them cooking is godly. Okay? This becomes a huge tension. I was working with a Kerala couple actually 3 weeks ago. He's born and raised in America. And what he did in the second week of marriage is he went like this: "Where's my chaya?" Okay? Born and raised, he does not know how to make a cup of chaya. Okay? This is a problem. Okay? So teach your wonderful young men, but let's beyond chaya, just a few things. Tell them it's godly. You're closer to God when you know to do those things. Do you feel the parent? Okay, okay. Do couple continue the sessions without dropping out? That's going to be a challenge. That's a very good question. I have very few dropout rates. I'm not bragging. I stay with the couple ever so patiently. I stay with them. I hang in there with them, because if I can save one marriage from domestic violence, I know I have saved one life. It takes tremendous patience. I do not have a high dropout rate, but that takes a lot of work. You have to hang in there. I will see the man separately than the woman. I will see the parents. I work with them. It's a very slow process. It's like slow surgery. You don't want them to quit too quickly. Children learn by observation. If they saw parents doing, they think it's okay and normal. I couldn't agree with you. I believe parents have a major role in this. How can I judge if someone is hurting respect or hurting my ego? How do you avoid ego in relationships? Oh, that's another talk, by the way. I could spend a lot of time on, are they hurting my ego or are they hurting me? So that's a whole another one. If your ego is hurt, you need to have the maturity for recovery. But if you are hurting my core, you need to have boundaries. That's another talk. That is not for today. That's a fantastic question. Okay. Thoughts or questions? I promised Sarah that I would be doing an hour, and I'm trying to keep to this. We have about 6 minutes. Any kind of feedback, helpful, not helpful, thoughts or questions?
I think there was a question that you may have missed. It says, if a guy makes up each time and tries to be normal, how do you deal with him?
Let me see. Say the question again. I must have missed it. Go ahead, Sarah. Could you read that again?
Yeah, if a guy makes up each time and tries to be normal, how do you deal with him?
I have a classic definition for apology. Apology without changed behavior is an excuse for more violence. So a making up has to have changed behavior, incredibly changed behavior. So this making up, I'm sorry, making up. Are you going to go to your anger management class? When are you going to sign up? Are we going to go for marital therapy? Are we going to go for recovery? What I'm trying to say is there has to be changed behavior. Let's see, when are you going for the anger management? Is that being set up? Saying I am sorry without changed behavior, there was a lot of that. If you followed Marin Joy's case, there was a lot of I'm sorry, but there was absolutely no resources and change behavior. So making up without change behavior is an excuse for domestic violence. Others. Do we have do's and don'ts in marriage life? That's a whole another presentation. I teach a whole class on clean fighting versus dirty fighting. You can never cross certain boundaries in a marriage, whether it's a Kerala marriage or not. You cannot cross them. We call that clean fighting. Fighting is an essential part of living together. How do you do clean fighting versus dirty fighting? Those are do's and don'ts. I have them usually posted in my office, and I usually ask them to sign a covenant that they will follow that. And part of it is they haven't seen it at home. So this is, I'm giving them new language. That's a very good question. Other thoughts or questions?
There's a couple more here. One suggestion is that I think we all need to go for counseling sessions, even if there are no current issues, just like our yearly physical to recalibrate our minds. And then, yeah, another one is boundaries are so important in healthy relationships, need to be respected.
Mm-hmm. That's a whole another presentation. is what are boundaries? I believe boundaries are essential on a cellular level, and boundaries should be respected. And boundary violations cause domestic violence.
And another question is, if a spouse identifies the problem but does not want to do counseling, are there some ways we can help without being overbearing?
20 years ago, I would have said, read a book, watch a YouTube. But in my clinical experience, domestic violence is like level 4 cancer. You must get to a good practitioner, and you must face it with somebody who can manage the disease. Otherwise, the disease is insidious. That's 20 years ago, I would give them a little book or a little resource or a YouTube. It needs somebody else to literally dissect and to create boundaries and to give resources. It's 11:59. I'm going to close with my final line one more time. It's from Amanda Gorman. She presented this when President Biden was inaugurated. I changed it a little bit, and I wanted to hold on to this. For there is always light, if only we are brave enough to face the shadow. There is always light if we are brave enough to be the light. So I'm going to go myself on mute. I'm sure you have closing thoughts.
Thank you very much, Reverend Asha. I don't know if anybody wants to ask any more questions, or if you have the time to wait for a few more minutes. So I'm going to give a couple of minutes to see if anybody wants to come up and ask a question in public. Anybody, you can raise your hands or unmute yourself and talk. Because we don't get this opportunity very often to get Reverend Asha to speak to us. If you don't have any questions, I will give it to Vinod for a vote of thanks. But before that, if you want to get help or counseling services, or if you know anybody who needs help, Reverend Asha's details can be found at Trinity Counseling Services. And I'm sure she's now offering telehealth also. So, I mean, I'm getting a lot of positive feedbacks in the chat box. I can read all of that, but I mean, I'm sure you can see it, Reverend Asha. So let me give it to Vinod, unless anybody else have any questions. All right.
Hello, Uraniana, California. Any question? We are facing this violence in almost. Hello.
Clear.
Clear. Can you read it one more time?
Sorry, I was just wondering, even though the domestic violence is very common in most of the houses in Malayali culture, none of them really wanted to come forward and get the help. I'm not saying none of them, but majority of them, they don't like to, or they are kind of forced not to come forward. Do you have anything about any suggestions or anything like how people can come forward without any fear?
I want to make sure I heard the question. You are asking, most people are afraid to come forward or are reluctant to come forward. Did I hear you correctly?
And yes, totally.
How do we motivate people to come forward?
Yes.
Let me tell you how my practice works. 20 years ago, I worked with a couple. And that couple is in the same Bible study group with another couple who had it. What is happening is those who get help are the best witnesses and the best motivators to others. So what you want to do is this is like, do you know there's positive virus and negative virus? The negative virus is like COVID virus, it makes us ill. But the positive is, if once you get help and you're on the other side, you can be contagious in sharing. We have somebody, and I'm not speaking for myself. That is how the word gets around. It's not by publicity. It's not by a poster board. And frankly, that is how the practice to Malayalis grew. I wasn't looking to work with Malayalis. I wasn't really looking, because I have 30 countries that I work with. I'm a cross-cultural therapist. Malayalis are the toughest to work with. They are the toughest to work with. They are the toughest. A lot of work to work with Malayalis, because they push you and push you. But I am a Malayali. I have to give back to my people. It's my mission to give back to my people. So one spoke to one, and then one has a roommate in California. That one spoke. One has a roommate in Bangalore, and one has a roommate in Zambia. Do you see how this goes? The word spread, and you want to become spreaders. You don't have to be afraid. This can be done discreetly. And I also believe confidentiality and discretion is key to treatment. I'm not blah, blah, blahing to the whole world, because frankly, I would lose my license. But secondly, I don't believe in gossip. It's not a kind of thing I participate in. Do you see what I'm talking about or not? So I want you to know that spread the word. Those who have help, those who have a sense of help, spread the word. We spread words that are negative about each other. Let's spread the good word. Okay. A little shout out today to all my cousins from all around the world joining us today. There are several of them. You know who you are. Thank you for joining and being my encouragers from Bangalore and from Mysore and from Kuwait. Thank you so much.